Hello everybody, thank you for tuning in to the Learnology channel. My name is Johnny and I'm going to be guiding you today through a Ruby on Rails sort of initial backend setup. So we're going to be running some migrations, we're going to be creating some models, and we're going to be just sort of doing the whole database all the way up through the controller. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So in order to do this video, we're going to assume that you already have a dev set up. If not, I'll link to the video down below so that you can watch, get yourself set up and acquainted with development environment. But this assumes that you've already downloaded things like Homebrew, Xcode, things like that, and you have all of your, language stuff set up in the background. So in our consoles, we're going to be building a Ruby on Rails app. So we're going to type Rails new, and then we're just going to call it, we can just call it example app. Okay, and now that we have our Rails app created, we're going to go ahead and change directory into our example application. So we'll do cd example app, and then I just hit the tab button to get that to type faster. And then I'll hit enter. That's going to bring us into our app. And then to bring it up in VS Code, I'm just going to type code and dot. That brings up every single file in the folder that we're working in, or the directory that we're working in. Okay, so this is the project. As you can see, we have a Rails app here, and this is our example app. We have an app. We have some controllers right here. We have some models. We also have a database and things like that. So we can go ahead and configure that. So what we'll do today is we'll make maybe a library application. So that will include having some books, and they're going to be stored in certain ways, and we're going to want to do some lookups to get the specific books. In order to start, first we're going to want to write a migration. So we're going to do Rails G migration, and we want to be careful with what we name this. Since this migration will be creating a table for us to store books in our library, we should call this migration create_books and enter. And so what that's going to do is that's going to generate a migration here that you can see in the db migrate directory. And then this is the file. Notice that it has a timestamp here. That is when I created it, which is 2023-10-29. That's October 29th in 2023. And then there's, additional information for what time I actually created it at. The reason that happens is because say that I'm on a new computer or a new machine, or maybe I hired somebody and, there's a new member of my team. Well, when they first go to set up the application locally for development, they're going to need a way for the database to be set up on their machine as opposed to the database that I have on my machine. We want them to be set up the same. So we write our migrations in order in sort of an instruction kind of step-by-step recipe for creating a new database on whatever machine this particular web app is downloaded on. So, whenever somebody new comes onto the team, one of the first things that they might do is when they download the application, from GitHub or wherever, they're going to run migrations to get their local database set up. So we are going to go ahead and check out our new migration. And as you can see, we have it. It's a Ruby class, and it's called create books here. It inherits from something called active record, which is the ORM that Ruby on Rails uses. The ORM is how our models are able to communicate with the database and pull up the information. So in this case, it's going to be pulling up books. Here, we'll just assign a couple of values of things we want to track on our books. So we probably want to track the title of the book. So we'll say t.string title. Every book has a title, so we're just going to say null false to dictate that it is in fact required if you want to create a new book in our database. Now, we have a book title. We could probably have an author. For now, I think we'll just, we'll leave that blank. I'm thinking down the line we could maybe create an association here between authors and books and have authors be their own table, so we don't have to store the author's name on, let's say an author wrote 12 different books. We don't have to write author 12 different times. So we're going to probably create another table for authors and then have them link up with the books that they've written, which we will go into later, so don't really worry too much about that right now. Maybe we can do t.integer, and we can say maybe number of pages, and we'll also say null false. And we also have our t.timestamps. So describing our book, we're going to have a title, the number of pages, and then when it was created at and updated at in our own database. So, and if we want to see that run, we can say bundle exec in our console rake db migrate. Bundle exec just runs whatever command after exec, which in this case would be rake db migrate. It runs it with our gem file. So it runs it with all the versions that we've said we want for certain gems. And then it, executes this command, this rake command here with those versions rather than maybe what I have. If I have a later, more recent version installed on my computer, it's going to, look at the gem file. And if the gem file says to use an older version, then it's going to use an older version. So cool. We're going to run that migration here. And then what we see is we have in fact created books. We can also now look at our schema here, which is a representation of the database. Now we do not ever edit the schema, ever. And why don't we edit it directly? Well, it's because Active Record does that for us. So we don't want to mess up how it reads this file or anything like that. We want to leave it alone. However, we can look at it, and it does tell us that we do in fact have a table here called books. It's got title, number of pages, created at, and updated at. So perfect. Now that we have books represented in the database, we're going to want to create a model that represents what a single book is. So if we go over to app models, you'll see right here we have something called application record as a sort of default model that we have. Application record is a class that we're going to want all of our models to inherit from if they're going to be talking to the database. And that is because application record inherits from something called active record. And again, I think we talked about that earlier. Active record is the ORM, and it's how our models will communicate with the database and look things up. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and create a book model. There is a way to generate a book model, but I think we're going to just create one. So we'll do book.rb. And this model represents a single book whenever it would be created. It's a Ruby model for that. So we'll say class book, and then we're going to say it inherits, that's the less than sign, from application record, which is the class that we were just looking at. Okay, and now that we have our book model, just to confirm that we do in fact have our book model, if I go to here and type Rails C to open up the Rails console, that's going to load up our application and give us the ability to type within or control within the application what we want, what commands we want to execute in the console. Now we can say book.new, and that's going to show us what a new book is going to look like. And here you see this is what an active record object would look like in the console. It's sort of a way for us to interact with what the book would look like in the database. So you could say things like book.find. If this was the third book in the database, it would be book.find 3, and then we could find it directly here. So we have our book. Now let's go and make sure that we're covering our validations. So I think we said in our migration that we wanted it to have a title. So we can say here in our model validates title, and then we can say presence true. Now, what do you think presence true means? You can pause it here, maybe take a guess, give yourself a chance. Okay, so yeah, presence true, if you guess correctly, would be similar to what we had with null false. We're saying that title is required in order for you to create a new book. And if you don't provide one, then at the model level, it's going to reject your query for a new entry into the database before it even hits the database. So it's just sort of another layer of protection against bad data. So we have validates title, presence true, and I think we also said validates number of pages, presence true, right? So we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that we have books in our database, we're probably going to want authors associated with those books, right? Every book is written by an author, and books can be written by multiple authors, I think. Or sorry, the other way around. Books can be written by an author. Authors can write many books. So in other words, a book belongs to an author, and an author has many books. So we can actually write those types of relationships both in the model and in the database. And the way we do that is, let's generate another migration first to create a new table. So I'm going to exit the console here. And then we'll do Rails G migration. And we'll say create authors. And we'll just give it a second. Great. And now we can go over to our new migration here. Let's give our author some information. We'll say t.name, and we'll say null false, because every author has a name. So we're going to say t.name, and that's going to be our new author, or what our authors will look like. So we'll do, again, bundle exec rake db migrate. Oh, and it looks like we have an error here. Let's see what that is. Oh, it says null false. Oh, you know what? There's no comma there. That's why. Oh, because it's supposed to be t.string name and then a comma. Perfect. Now we can run it. Cool. So we've created our authors, and now we can go into our schema to verify that. So here we have books, and here we have authors. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and create our authors model. So I'm going to go into the models directory here and create another model for an author. So we'll say author.rb. All right, and we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to say class author. Class names always begin with a capital letter. So in this case, it's capital A, and we're going to inherit from application record. And we'll hit end. Okay, and then we're going to validate name, because each author has a name, and we're going to say presence true. And I'll save that. And now if we load up the Rails console again, we can say Rails C, enter. And then if I say author.new, then boom, there's a representation of what a new author will look like. So, and just to show you, for example, what it would look like, what an error could look like if you tried to use a model that you hadn't created, you could say, I don't know, maybe librarian.new, and it's going to say uninitialized constant librarian. Now that tells you that you don't have a model for librarians, because notice that the capital L here, you're invoking the librarian model, which in this case, in our current application, doesn't exist. So if you see an error like this, it usually means that you don't have the thing you're trying to use. So one thing that we need to do here is we're going to need to create an association between our books and our authors, right? The database shouldn't be able to tell who wrote what book. That way we only need to create one author, and then if they wrote 7 books, we could just tell, the book object, we could say, well, the author ID for this book is, author 7 in our database or something like that. It's a very easy way for the book to tell very quickly and for Active Record to tell very quickly which author wrote which book. So we're going to write a third migration here. So we're going to say Rails G migration. And we're going to call it add author to books. So we're going to add an author column to the books table. And I'm going to say enter. And then now we have another migration here. So if we come over here, notice there's a def change here now. Instead of a create table, this file didn't inherently do a create table. And that's probably because we called it add, or we started it with add blank to blank. Rails tends to rely heavily on us using the correct naming conventions for things. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background on Ruby on Rails, and it's very much encouraged to use proper naming conventions, things like models being singular while the tables being, pluralized, models having capital letters, controllers ending with controller, things like that. Also the views. So if you're rendering a page, you're going to want to put it inside the proper file. So we don't really have to worry too much about this right now because we don't have any views. But if we were to render like a books page, we would have a books folder inside the views folder. And then there would be an index.html, a show.html, and things like that. And those would correspond with the index and show pages of a book. So, but it all relies on us using the proper names for different folders. And again, we will get into that, just not quite yet. So here we have a def change. That's sort of like when we migrate forward, it's going to add a column, and when we migrate backward, it's going to remove it. You can also define those things individually. So you can say def up, and then you can say def down. So it's the same basic thing. It's just if you want to be more specific with what you want it to do when you migrate forward and what you want it to do when you roll back or migrate backwards. So we'll be more specific here. So here we can decide to add a column, specifically a reference to another table. We're going to, in this case, add author to our books table. So Rails or Active Record has a method that we can use here. It's called add_reference. And so we are going to add that reference to the authors table. Okay. And we are going to be referring, we're going to do it to the books table. And we are going to be referring to an author. And we're going to say index true, meaning it's going to be an ID that another table is using. So in this case, this is going to end up being author_ID is what the table name or the column name will be. Okay, and then we want to make sure that there's a healthy way for us to handle when we roll back the database. So let's say we migrate forward, we've added this reference to our books table. Let's say for whatever reason we want to go back a step and we want to remove it. Maybe the code didn't work properly and we want to try to roll back to a previous version or something like that. Well, then we need to handle it here as well. Okay, and then what we're going to want to do here is we can migrate forward. So we'll do bundle exec rake db migrate. And that's going to bring us up to speed. If we check this schema, we're going to see that we have the author ID here. And then we want to make sure that we have a healthy down. So we're going to verify that. We're going to say remove reference, not remove column. And we're going to go ahead and try it here. Bundle exec rake db rollback. And boom. So it looks like it ran properly. We come over to the schema. Now notice that there's no reference there to the authors table. So we're healthy. So we want to just make sure we're all the way up to date. So we're going to say bundle exec rake db migrate again once more just to be up to date. And then I'm going to do Command K just to get rid of all this stuff in our console. We can check the schema here and notice that now we have our author ID again. So we are now up to date. Okay. So the next step here is we have our author, we have our book. Our book has an author, it belongs to an author, and so on and so forth, right? So what we can do now is we can write these associations on our books and authors. On our book is going to belong to an author, right? So what we're going to want to do is on our model, we want to make sure that our model knows when it's going to look something up, that it can refer to an author. So we're going to say belongs to, and we're going to say author. And then we're going to go over to our author and we're going to describe the opposite here. An author in this case has many books. And notice here that we're using the plural now. That's because we're saying has many books. And the book belongs to a single author. So it's very much, Ruby on Rails is having us use plain English and be respectful of plural and singular. So good. Okay, now that we've said that, has many books and belongs to an author, let's go ahead and create some of these in the database. So here we can go to our seeds file and we can actually create some seeds. This is so much like how we've done bundle exec rake db migrate and db rollback, db create and db drop. We can also do bundle exec rake db seed. And what that's going to do is that's going to just basically plant seeds in the database. And it's going to be whatever we want to do. So for example, here you can say they're creating a character and they're creating a movie. So we can go ahead and create our own things in the database. So let's start by maybe creating some authors. So we do author.create. And then we're just going to provide the information here that we've said on our migrations needs to be there. So we're going to say the name of the author is going to be, I don't know, J.K. Rowling. That's a good first one. She wrote Harry Potter, right? We all know Harry Potter. Expecto Patronum. Okay, so we're creating an author here, and we're actually going to save that as a local variable. So here I will say author1 equals author.create. I'm going to add an exclamation point here. The exclamation point is just a fast fail, so if you try to create this author when you run the seeds file, it's going to fail if it doesn't work. So we're going to do author1 here, and then we'll do another author. We'll say author2 equals author.create, and we'll say name is J.R.R. Tolkien. Cool. He's a pretty cool dude. All right, and then we can create some books as well. So we'll do book.create. And the reason that I saved this author here is because we can now refer to this as the author of the book. So for example, we can say book.create. We're going to say title. And here we'll say Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And we can say number of pages. I don't know how many, but I think it's roughly like 400 and something. So I'll say 450. And then the most important thing here is we can say author, and we can say author1 because we saved the new author that we created in the database locally here as author1, and now we can refer to them over here. Now we'll do the same thing for another one. So I'll do Shift Command down just to copy this line down. Instead of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, we'll call it Game of Thrones. I don't know the names of the books because I haven't read them. So I'm just going to say Game of Thrones. If you want to throw in the comments down below what they're called, I'd love you guys to inform me on that. But yeah, for now, we're just going to say Game of Thrones. I hope that doesn't upset people too much. And the author of the Game of Thrones series is author2, who we have saved here as the author that we created, whose name is J.R.R. Tolkien. Okay, and then what we can do here is we can say bundle exec rake db seed. And that's going to run the seeds file, and it looks like it ran it without any issue, which is awesome. So now we can go to the Rails console, open that up. And we can say author.first, and that's J.K. Rowling. Now, what's cool about this and our associations that we wrote, J.K. Rowling has many books that she's written, right? So we can say author.first.books. And in our database, there's only one, but notice it's an array here, open and close brackets. And there's only one book currently, but we could always add more to the database and refer to author number 1 as the author of the book we create. So here is author 1's books. She's written Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now, likewise, we can say book.last, which would be Game of Thrones. Again, I'm sorry about that. So if we say book.last.author, singular, and hit enter, it pulls up J.R.R. Tolkien. So now we've successfully created some associations between our books and our authors, and we are now able to refer to them. Nice work, everybody. Nice work. So maybe as a part 2 to this video, I will upload, what we can do on the front end with this type of information, how we can get it, how we can create API endpoints to send this information over to either our own front end, or maybe, you know, somebody else's application, their front end. But for now, this is pretty good. We've successfully created a backend for our library. We have books that we're storing, and we have a database of authors as well, as you can see here. So yeah, I hope you're all feeling pretty confident and in a good place for setting up your own Ruby on Rails backend. If you like this video, please drop a like down below to let me know. And, you know, if you have any suggestions for future things that you want to learn, I'd be happy to make a video on it. Just leave a comment down below, and yeah, let me know what you think you'd want to see or what you want to learn. And as always, I hope you guys learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.